Hey, what is up, everybody? Matt Modi here with OddsJam, giving you my best NFL bets specifically for Saturday's NFL betting slate. So we got two games, Chiefs versus Raiders and Titans versus Jaguars. Both games have pretty important playoff implications. If the Chiefs win, they get the 1 seed and the first round bye in the playoffs. Now, obviously, that doesn't necessarily give them home field later in the playoffs, as the NFL announced in the recent memo. But that's a bunch of playoff implications stuff that doesn't matter for these bets and for this video, just that it's an important game for the Chiefs. And then for the Jaguars and Titans, winner wins the AFC South, hosts a playoff game. Obviously, a ton of importance there. Jags being one of the hotter teams in the NFL. Titans, the literal opposite. They've lost 5 or 6 straight. Granted, they rested starters last week. The Titans did against the Cowboys, knowing that that game had no meaning, that this game has all the meaning. So should be a pretty good slate of games for Saturday. So let's find some bets to make for them as well. So here's one, and this is a player prop. Jerick McKinnon over 32.5 receiving yards. So McKinnon has quietly been incredible this year, especially recently. He's had a receiving touchdown, I think, in 5 straight games at this point. McKinnon's basically who the Chiefs thought they were getting when they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Good for McKinnon. Had just a couple years of nothingness where he was working his way back from a pretty bad knee injury. So good for him, making his name again in the NFL. Really good player prop on him to go over 32.5 receiving yards. So BetMGM prices this at -110. And the reason why it's good is because of the math, because of these no vig odds you see here, just to the right of the BetMGM icon, -122.56. So these odds are pulled from the sharpest, most accurate bookmakers in the world in terms of pricing odds. So if you look at this screenshot here, you see odds range from -110 all the way up to -145, -144, -140. Pretty massive gap between the odds for this one individual play. He's either, the bet's the same. He's either going to go over or he's going to go under. But the odds vary at a pretty distinct and big margin between this sportsbooks. So what this means is that one of these sportsbooks has to be incorrect. With odds that vary that much, with such a huge gap between the odds, they both can't be correct, right? Like Apple stock can't be at $300 and $200 a share and have them both be the accurate price. One of them has to properly reflect the market. It's the same thing with sports betting. So what OddsJam did was test thousands and thousands of previous betting opportunities to determine what sportsbooks are consistently the best, consistently the most accurate. That feeds into these no vig odds here. So wherever you see no vig odds in this column here, you can view them as the true line, the perfect line of what a market should truly be priced at. So anywhere in which you can get better odds, and by better I mean higher payout, that's going to be a profitable bet. So for this specific betting opportunity, the market for this should be priced at -122.5, basically. We're getting that 12 cents lower, 12 whole cents at BetMGM at -110 odds. Right off the bat, that's a sign of a really good bet. And then what you want to do, kind of what I was already doing before, you want to compare the BetMGM line to the rest of the sportsbooks. And I should say you want to compare the bet that you are placing, which in this case is the BetMGM one, with the rest of the sportsbooks. So -110, how does that compare? We see Caesars at -145, DraftKings at -140, Pinnacle at -144. No book even has this below -140, which is 30 cents higher than what BetMGM is giving you. That's insane. That's a really, really good price that we're getting this BetMGM line. So it's a really good player prop. So I definitely recommend taking this one. BetMGM has me limited, so I could barely get more than $10 on it. But for those of you at home, I actually recommend putting a full unit on this one unit, which I normally recommend, or I should say, the most I put normally on a player prop is 3/4 of a unit. In this case, I actually recommend putting a full unit. That's how good the value is on this one. That's play number 1. Next up, we are looking at the Jaguars straight up -6. Just a straight up play on the point spread. Nothing more complicated than that. Jags -6. The bet is at -105 odds at Fox Bet. And the no vig odds for this one is at -108. So one thing that I'll preface, so the gap between the Fox bet line and the rest of the sports books, it's not as big, right? Like going from minus 110 to minus 140, it's 30 cents. That's a huge gap. Going from minus 105 to minus 115, that's only 10 cents. Not as big of a gap. I'm glad we can all do that math. But what I will say is that for a main line like this, like a point spread, gets so much action that even the smaller differences actually have a ton more value. So that's not me saying that this Jags bet is better than the bet than this player prop one. Just that to not let the smaller gaps between the sports books scare you off of anything. Because I mean, a point spread gets the most action in an NFL game, right? It's the most heavily bet market. So these lines are incredibly tight, which means that the gap that you can find between them is all the more valuable. So this minus 105 at Fox Bet is still a really good play. Some books have it at minus 110, we see here, but then we see the sharp books like Pinnacle at minus 115. And then we see other sports books, minus 121, minus 117, minus 124, minus all the way up to minus 138 on one of them, which is just insane. But no book has the Jags side of this as the underdog, right? Like if we're looking at where every sportsbook prices it, every sportsbook either has it at 50-50, which means they charge the same amount of juice on the over versus the under, like you see right here, minus 110, minus 110. PointsBet doesn't know who's more likely to cover to win this minus 6 bet. So what they're doing is charging the equal amount of juice on both sides, saying, we don't know, it's 50-50. As does, there's one other book, Ballybet, also has it at 50-50. We'll look at every other book that prices this. BetMGM favors the under. Caesar, or not the under, excuse me, favors the Jags. Favors the Jags. Caesars favors the Jags, as does Bet365, DraftKings, Tipico, BetRivers, Circa, and Pinnacle, and then XBet, with Pinnacle being the sharpest. So pretty much every sportsbook is saying the more likely scenario here is that the Jags cover minus 6, some of them by a pretty heavy amount, and we're only getting that at minus 105 at FoxBet. So that's why this is such a good bet. And the Jags, like I said, they're one of the hottest teams in the NFL. These two teams recently played a couple weeks ago, and the Jags won by 14 in a game that actually was an even bigger blowout than 14 points, it sounds like. And then the Titans are starting a quarterback who's literally been with the team for like 2 weeks in Josh Dobbs. So a lot of factors in favor of the Jags here, which makes sense when you look at how all the markets are pricing it, except for one. FoxBet just has this one mispriced, which is giving us a really good bet. So this is play number 2, Jags minus 6, minus 105 at FoxBet. And then the last one we're going to lock in here, and there are 2 spreads for the same game, Raiders plus 11.5, Raiders plus 11, that are positive EV on Circa Sportsbook. I am actually going with this top one here, Raiders plus 11.5, just because it's got the higher EV percent. You could take both of them. That's certainly a strategy. If a spread at multiple lines is positive EV, you could take all of them, or you could just take the one with the highest expected value. And that's what I'm going to go ahead and do here. So Circa prices this at minus 137. The closest book is 10 cents higher at minus 147. And then look at every other book. Minus 154, minus 162, minus 155. Pretty much across the board. I guess the closest is actually this one at minus 145. But still, majority of sportsbooks have it in the minus 150s, some up to minus 160. So this minus 137, despite being a little bit steeper in terms of odds, is still a really good play. So this is going to be my third and final pick for this video. Raiders plus 11.5, 1 player prop, 2 main lines. So if you're tailing these, comment and let me know. But that's all I got for you guys. So I do appreciate everybody watching, and have a good one.